This case is about a young California kid who grew up hating music but discovered a gory subgenre within hip-hop. As a result, he met a young girl online who shared his music tastes. The two fell in love on the internet, but when they met in person, things went horribly wrong. This video talks about Sam McCroskey and the Farmville murders. Richard Samuel McCroskey was born on December 23, 1988, and lived in Hayward, California until he and his family relocated to Castro Valley. Those who knew Richard described him as a timid and insecure kid. He was frequently bullied because of his size and red hair. He was a polite and considerate boy who, unless provoked, never raised an argument or defended himself. However, McCroskey was known to have two personalities. He was a social outcast and a pushover in real life, whereas on the popular social networking site at the time, MySpace, McCroskey presented himself as a tough, self-assured, and aspiring horrorcore rapper. Horrorcore is a music genre that combines hip-hop and rap with grim themes such as death, murder, suicide, and mental illness. McCroskey was an aspiring horrorcore rapper and worked on the promotion crew of a well-known rapper in the industry known as Razzlekel. He worked as a graphic designer and designed a website for Razzlekel's branding. As his confidence in the horrorcore niche grew, he started chatting with other like-minded individuals. He met Emma Niederbrock, 16, and Melanie Wells, 18, on MySpace. Emma Niederbrock was known as a well-rounded young lady. She dabbled in the occult, listened to horrorcore and the Backstreet Boys, and played soccer in addition to participating in a horrorcore group on MySpace. She lived in Farmville, Virginia, with her mother, Deborah Kelly, and father, Mark Allen Niederbrock. Her parents, although divorced, were on good terms when it came to co-parenting their only child. Melanie Wells, then 18 years old, was very close to both of her parents and lived in Inwood, West Virginia with them. Melanie first connected with Emma and Richard through Razzlekel on MySpace, but they quickly grew to be each other's best friends. Deborah and Mark, Emma's parents, were not fans of the horrorcore scene as a whole. Deborah had a doctorate and was employed as a professor of sociology and criminology at Longwood University. Mark, Emma's father, made a living as a pastor. Since she had a mother who had studied criminal justice and a strictly religious father, the fact that their teenage daughter was listening to music about death and murder worried the estranged couple greatly. Deborah and Mark's main concern with Emma was keeping a line of communication open about the music she was listening to and the scene she was a part of, but in attempts to be supportive of her lifestyle, they never forbade her from doing so. As a result, Emma's parents were aware of her online activities, as well as her friendships with Melanie and Richard. Richard began interacting with Emma on a regular basis via MySpace direct message. In his mind, Emma was Richard's online and long-distance girlfriend. Emma, on the other hand, saw Richard as nothing more than a close friend. Even though they were acquaintances, Emma flirted with Richard and professed her love for him, but she never said he was her boyfriend. Nonetheless, the pair exchanged flirty messages back and forth for over a year before making plans to meet in person. The three teens made plans to meet in person in September 2009. There was a horrorcore music festival being held in Southgate, Michigan called Strictly for the Wicked. The three teens wanted to attend it. Emma's parents agreed to let their daughter attend the concert, but only if everyone stayed at their home in Farmville, and that they would drive the trio to and from the festival. Emma and Richard were excited to meet for the first time, and on September 12, 2009, Richard traveled to Virginia to meet Emma, Melanie, Deborah, and Mark in person. As previously mentioned, Richard had formed an internet relationship with Emma, but Emma only saw him as a friend. Emma was not attracted to the guy she'd been talking to online for a year when they met at the airport in Virginia. Richard's shyness and physical appearance put Emma off, and Richard immediately felt rejected. Still, on the same day, they went to the show as they had originally planned. The drive was 10 hours long, showing Emma's parents' commitment to keeping their teenage daughter safe. Andres Shrim, Razzlekel's boyfriend, claimed to have spotted the three at the festival that day during the concert. They appeared safe. Emma's parents dropped them off and then picked them up when it was over. According to Richard, Emma wasn't being faithful to him by flirting with other guys and musicians at the music festival. Richard grew increasingly irritated with Emma's behavior towards other guys. Some sources also said that Emma went out of her way to avoid Richard completely during the concert. And according to Richard's sister, the two even got into a heated argument that night. Another rumor claims that they had got into a fight after Emma got a flirty text from another guy at the show on her phone. Needless to say, Richard was not having a good time. The three of them returned home from the concert the next day, September 13, 2009, and continued to get to know each other. Emma and Melanie made their final MySpace post, and Melanie and her parents that she would return to West Virginia on September 16th. September 16th came and went with no sign of Melanie. When Melanie failed to return home, Kathleen Wells, her mother, began calling Deborah and Emma's house to check if anyone would answer. Richard ultimately picked up the phone after a few missed calls and informed Kathleen that everyone had gone to the movies and couldn't come to the phone. Melanie's distraught parents made numerous attempts to track her down, and Richard gave them a different story every time. Something seemed off. They contacted the Farmville police. The police then conducted a welfare check, but officers at first didn't find anything suspicious. Despite this reasoning, Melanie was still uneasy about Richard and the answers she was receiving from the police. Kathleen Wells began calling Mark Niederbrock, requesting that he check on his family and on Melanie. He lived in a different house since he was separated from his wife. Mark agreed to check up on his ex-wife and daughter. Hearing this, Kathleen was relieved that she thought she would finally get answers as to what happened to her daughter. However, hours had passed and she didn't hear back from Mark. Later that night, Kathleen called Farmville police again and asked them to conduct another welfare check. The police arrived at the Farmville house and were greeted by Richard at the door, who explained that the girls were out to watch a movie, so the police took his word for it and left without looking inside the house. Kathleen was not satisfied with this answer and called Richard once again. This time, however, instead of making any excuses, Richard simply said the girls could not come to the phone. Kathleen insisted Richard call the police himself, which he surprisingly did. Richard called the police and asked them to check the basement of the house as he was hearing sounds from down there. Once the police arrived, they checked the basement and didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so they left unworried. Yet, around the same day, neighbors began reporting a distinct odor coming from the house. Most of them shrugged it off as being that of a dead animal. Kathleen continued to call the police for help in finding Melanie, and this time, Farmville police decided to search the property once again. When they pulled into the driveway, they were stopped by a horrific odor coming from within the house, an odor some police officers were all too familiar with. The Virginia State Police entered Emma and Deborah's home around 3:20 p.m. and discovered 4 dead bodies. 3 of the bodies were discovered in a downstairs bedroom, while the 4th was discovered in an upstairs bedroom. According to investigators, all 4 bodies were initially considered to have been bludgeoned to death with a sledgehammer or a wood-splitting mowel. The police found Emma, Melanie, Deborah, and Mark. The police recovered 98 items from Deborah's home, including several pieces of electronic equipment. Among these items were a computer, a cell phone, and a digital camera. They later discovered that Richard had used some of these items to document his time alone after the murders and was contemplating suicide. When Mark had shown up to check on the girls, he had been attacked from behind with the same instrument. However, something was missing. Richard was not anywhere near the home. On the night before the bodies were discovered, Richard stole money from Mark's wallet as well as his car, a 2000 Hyundai, and took off. Police pulled Richard over as he was driving the stolen automobile. But because they didn't know they were looking for a killer, all they did was give Richard a ticket for driving without a license. He informed the cops he was only driving his girlfriend's father's car. After receiving the ticket, Richard got a ride to Richmond International Airport to get a flight back home to California. The police checked his MySpace account, traced his location, and in the early hours of September 19th, Virginia state officers found McCroskey sleeping in the baggage claim at the airport and arrested him. Richard was indicted with 6 counts of capital murder. Richard's defense attorney, Carrie B. Bowen, decided not to go through with the trial as doing so could risk the death penalty. So, on September 20th, 2010, Richard Samuel McCroskey pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of capital murder. He received 4 life sentences with an additional 632 years in prison. This case shook the entire community, from Farmville to Melanie's hometown in West Virginia, to Mark and Deborah's workplaces. The Farmville murders gives us a chilling reminder that people are not always what they appear to be online. and you should not trust anyone you meet online, no matter how friendly they seem.